In this video on JavaFX, we will now see how it all works. We will begin to look at how events can be processed and how we can write the code to respond to events. As a reminder, here is our Hello World GUI, and what we're going to do is we're going to explore what happens when you push one of these buttons. These buttons will trigger events that we will write code to respond to. Event-driven programming is different from sequential programming in that we don't know which button a user is going to click or in which sequence. So therefore, we have to have code that can respond to these actions. With a couple of terms here, we have the event source. That's the control on which the event occurred. So if a button is to have an action, then it's going to become a source of an event. A drop-down list could have an action, and it could be the source of an event. In fact, almost every control we have can be a source of any kind of event, even a label. You could click on a label or mouse over a label. The next concept is that of an event handler. Event handlers are objects that sit in the background and listen for events, and they handle them when they occur. Now obviously there is no little man sitting inside your GUI listening for an event. What we really have, though, is an instance of an interface, and that instance is known as an event handler. And the event handler really has one job. The one job that it has is to provide a body for the handle method. And the handle method accepts as a parameter an event. So what happens, let's say you push a button right here. An event is generated. And then the event passes into the handle method. And then inside the body of the handle method is the code that will do whatever it is you want to do once that button is pressed. I wanted to point out that not only is an event handler an instance of an interface, but it's a special kind of interface. It's called a functional interface. And what a functional interface is defined as is an interface that has only one method. So this interface only has the method handle, and that makes it a functional interface. This is important because, as you'll see, a functional interface can be replaced by a lambda expression. We just described an event being passed to the handle method of an event handler, but what is an event? There are many different kinds of events in JavaFX, the most common of which is an action event. This is an event that is created when you perform an action, if you click a button or you select something from a drop-down. This is the most commonly used type of event, but there are also other events. There's an input event whenever a key is pressed, like for example the A key or the plus key, any key on your keyboard, or a mouse is pressed. The key event fires whenever you just press the key. The mouse event is specific to when you click the mouse. A touch event can happen if you're on a touch screen and you touch the device. And then there's a window event, and the window event happens whenever the state of the window changes, if you minimize it, if you maximize it. So lots of different events. We're going to focus on action events for the rest of this video. The best way to learn about all the different events and how they're used is to look at the JavaFX API library. But here's a couple of examples from that library. The first is the class button, and how does an action event happens when the button is pressed. When the button is pressed, an action event is sent. How about a radio button as another example? When a radio button is pressed, an action event is also created. So this is how you can trap some of the actions that are happening on your screen. And These particular controls, the button, the radio button, and any control that you can have an action on, has a method, the onAction method. Here's an example from the combo box, and it shows you what happens with the onAction method. It's invoked whenever the value property is changed. So every different control will define an action differently, but what we're going to do is we're going to make controls, which we've already done, and then we're going to set their onAction event. So here we are again. We're going to extend the example we've already been looking at. As you recall, there was a start method of the GUI, and one of the things that we did in our start method was we had this private static method to set up controls. Previously, that method just created the controls and set some of their properties. But now we're going to go revisit that method and set a new property. We're going to set the onAction property. So here again we have button 1. It says say hello world, and here we set the onAction property of the button. And to set the onAction property of the button, we have to give that button an event handler. So the way we do this, or the way we used to do this still works, by the way, but we really have to give it an event handler. And what we're doing here is very interesting. What we're doing is we're actually creating the event handler on the fly. We're making a new event handler. So we're making an instance of the event handler interface. And remember that the event handler interface is a functional interface. It defines only one method. And so we're actually giving the body of that method right here. We're actually giving it a body for the handle method that you saw in some of the previous slides. So this is one way for us to create the action event. We're actually building an instance of something in Java called an anonymous class. And that's interesting, and that's fine. But something has happened with the new release of Java, and that happening was lambda expressions. And with lambda expressions, this work is made a whole lot easier. Let's take a look at button 2. Here's button 2, and button 2 also has a set onAction method, but button 2 sets it up as a lambda expression. And a lambda expression, as you will learn, is really an instance of a functional interface, so it fits nicely as a substitute for this event handler. And the way this works is you have an input to the lambda expression, that's E. E stands for events. So an event is coming in, and you can see an event coming in here. And then on the other side of the lambda expression is what we want to do as a result. So the lambda expression will take one thing as an input and one thing as an action. And that action can either be a single command or a block of commands. Now let's look more closely at the action of button 2. The right-hand side of my lambda expression is doing a system.out.println. That's fine. Very simple action. But notice that it is taking advantage of E. E was the input. E is basically the action event that came in. And with E, with this event, I can use its methods. One of the methods of the event is getting the target. That's useful because what that will show me is, hey, an event's been passed to me. That's awesome. But who was the control that initiated that event? So what I'm really doing with e.getTarget is I am returning button 2. So now I have button 2. And once I have that, I can get its text. So if the button said, say goodbye world, whatever that text was, once that button is pushed and the event is passed, I can use the event to get the target. And then once I get the target, I can get the text. There's something else interesting going on here. when I get the target, when I get the source, when I get the control that produced the event, I am not getting a button. I am getting a control. So I'm basically getting the superclass, which is good, except that the subclasses might have more information. For example, not every control has text. Therefore, not every control has a getText method. So what I need to do, as long as I am 100% assured that the control that's issuing this event is in fact a button, I have to do a cast. And here I cast it. I'm casting the returned control to be of the subtype button. And that's actually pretty safe for me to do, because why? I am casting it to be a button right in the code where I'm using button 2, which happens to be a button. So that's a little trick that you can do to get more specific information about the control that was pushed. So this is a very simple type of action. All this action is really doing is when the event happens, I'm going to print out to the console the name of the button that you can see displayed. So that's it. Now that we know how to make action events happen, we can now make our controls. We can use the setOnAction method. We can pass them a lambda expression, and the right-hand side of the lambda expression is going to do everything we want it to do to respond to the event. I hope this was useful to you, and there may be some more videos coming up on JavaFX, but in essence now we know everything we need to start building some very simple GUIs.